Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Octant Community Meeting. Today is April 1st. We don't have any prepared April Fool's jokes, but if you come up with some during the meeting, please share with the rest of the group. Per usual, I'll share the agenda here so people can see what we're talking about. And if you have anything that you want to add into the agenda, please do so as well. And with that, the first part that we want to talk about is the new release.
Yeah, thanks, Jonas. So we cut a 0.11.1, which is just a bug fix release that fixed some issues where people were unable to load the page when there was pending PVCs. There was some JSON serialization issues that were fixed up, as well as some tooltip adjustments, some fixes for actually running the commands from our uh, build.go file, and because of the update to Angular 9. And we also fixed the tabs not loading because of the external services. So just a few things that were preventing people from actually being able to load Octant. So we recommend that everyone go ahead and upgrade to the latest release. And I want to thank Milan and Sam and Jordan, who all contributed those fixes in a short period of time. So I appreciate that. That's the main, that's all we had for talking about release stuff. The only other thing on the agenda for today was Bryan Liles was going to do some discussion about domain-driven development, specifically around some of the engineering we're going to be putting into Octant. It's going to help separate out the different domain spaces within Octant and allow us to better allow us to better engineer Octant to work both as a local application as well as in cluster, and make it something that is easier to test and just more robust. So Bryan, if you want to go ahead and take it.
Oh, all right. So, hello. I don't get to these as much. I end up being busy a lot. So, by the time I remember this is happening, it's always it's 1 p.m. now, but it's always at like 3 p.m. on Wednesday. So, which is actually the worst time because then I'll forget again. But I stayed on it this week, and I wanted to talk about what Octant is now, and like Wayne said, why we would be thinking about the architecture of Octant a little bit more. So Octant started about in September of 2018, and Sam was here. Actually, he's the only original team member besides me that was around for this. And what we didn't know at that time is really the shape of the problem we were solving. So, because originally Octant was, can I figure out what's going wrong in my cluster? And so we set out to do that, and then we got acquired by VMware. There were changes, and then we found that we wanted to add more features, so there's more changes, and we went, the front end is doing things, more changes, and actually we saw this opportunity that we wanted to take a while ago to run Octant in cluster as an option, but the way our Octant is architected, it's pretty hard to do that. We use these things called informers, which means that we keep a cache of what's in your cluster, at least for namespace and memory, and that's not going to fly whenever we run it in cluster. So um, we wanted to make these changes, but the hardest piece of, of this change is that where do you start? I'm not saying that Octant is a hairball that is messy and can't be extended, because we're still extending it. But the problem we're finding is that Octant is pretty much hard coded to run in one way, and there's a lot of coupling that we were able to get away with over the last year and a half, and now we have to untease that. And the naive way would be just go in there and do it. Go in there and just rewrite the whole thing. And when will we be done? I have no idea. So instead, wanted to actually do some software engineering here and apply this concept called domain-driven development. There's a really thick book about it written originally like 17 years ago, and it talks about these concepts for organizing software. And what I'll do for over the next minute or so is explain how we're actually going to use this for Octant. So what is Octant right now? It's a web front end. It's a pretty complex web front end. And then there's a back end as well. And what does that back end do? Well, it talks to the cluster. It generates components that can be viewed in the front end. It updates the stores internally. It does things. It knows how to visit objects. And really what we have is we have all these things and they're slotted in, but just not well. So with domain-driven development, what we're going to do is we're going to loosely follow this and we're going to work on moving Octant to basically be different domains. And around these domains, we'll have domain objects. And then what we'll do below that is we'll have our business logic and then our implementations. And the reason we need to do this is because the hardest problem in front of us is what happens when you go from a single user to a multi-user. And when single user is easy, we can make all sorts of guesses, and we have, or actually assumptions too. We've made so many assumptions about it being single user, but when it's multi-user, well, we're going to have some kind of control about who's requesting what. And then also, we're going to have a whole new store. Like I said before, we were storing things in informers, and that would not be memory safe for any cluster. If there's no way that we can do, 10 to 20 to 100 to 150 megs of storage per user of Octant and cluster. No one would run it. So what we're going to have to do now is we're pulling it all apart, and some of the high-level changes that are going to be made are there's going to be some concept of logins, and then our store right now, which is basically just a facade in front of informers, we're going to have to replace. We're going to have to add another one, and the next one, and this will probably just be hit the cluster in real time. And for this app to work in single user and multi-user, we're going to have to push a lot of the implementation details even further down, because at a certain point, you don't actually need to know this. When I query the cluster, I need to know what my client is, and then I need to know how I can query using the store. I don't need to know what the store's backing is, and really the store doesn't have to care about the cluster client. So we probably should decouple those. So this is so you're going to see some work. I've started. It's a large project. I committed a PR this morning that actually already got merged, where I'm starting from the beginning, which is when we boot Octant, we have this thing. It used to be called Developer Dash when we first created it. So there's this package called Package Dash, and I just split out. Now Package Dash doesn't know where the front end or the back end is, and we'll have to repeat this a whole bunch of times to make it work. But the upside of this is not only do we get the ability to do multi-user and single user, this will actually make Octant so much easier to extend. And some of the features that are taking a while, like more robust plugins, more robust components, more fidelity in our workload viewer, more fidelity in our problem detector will be easier because it'll be easier to test and easier to implement. So that's my discussion of what we're doing right now, or at least what I'm spearheading. I'm done, Wayne.
Excellent. Thank you, Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have any questions or anything to add? Or
I actually am curious. How are you going to go about it? Like in sort of logistical terms, like a feature branch that has a huge refactor in it, or is it possible to break this up into pieces?
Yeah, it is.
The whole application.
Yep.
It actually is, and I'm we're going to have some, we're going to have some guidelines. So the first commit that I did, where we broke out the front end and the back end handlers, I introduced this new concept of options, and it's actually still works the exact same way. Matter of fact, I copied and pasted most of the code. I just moved it to a different place and then put a different interface in front of it. So, Tim, to answer your question, is that long term, no, we won't have to have a long term refactoring branch. We should. It's going to take a while. We're not going to be able to get it done. This is actually probably going to be like, I don't know, 2 months plus of work just to really get it right. But we'll be able to do it in line, and we shouldn't break anything.
Okay, so it's going to be a little bit of a blue-green style. So you're going to have some duplicated code for a while so everything works. And as those components are replaced and refactored, you can remove the old versions? Or am I reading too much into what you said?
If we were doing this in Ruby or Python or JavaScript, yeah, I would probably say yeah. But because we're doing it in TypeScript and it's pretty easy to see when a type isn't called anymore, we actually shouldn't have any duplication. Things might be in a weird place for a while, like why would I call it that way? But we won't actually have the duplication. And actually, it solves another big problem that we had that kind of slows us down, is that in certain places, Octant is complex and hard to test. Now, since we're breaking them down, we'll need less mocks. I mean, we'll still have the same number of mocks, but for individual tests, you'll need less mocks, less setup, and you'll actually be able to test the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think another common pattern that you'll see is us creating interfaces that then encapsulate the same logic and the same things that are there now without making any other code changes except getting this stuff behind an interface. So then that frees us up to then start to actually change those things behind the scenes. And we've created this new interface for the various components to talk to each other through. So and then we're trying to make sure that all of our interfaces that involve communicating across domains are getting pushed up into the package folder. So that way we can get rid of this deep nested generating of mocks and have all of our mocks generated from a single location.
Yes. And actually, so there are some other benefits. At VMware, I still watch over Octant, and I'm still every once in a while throw in a PR for something. But in another project that I have, we wanted to use Octant, and I wanted to write a plugin. And now, as I'm doing all this, is actually so it's all selfish for me. I want this to be more organized, so it's easier for me to extend Octant, so I can actually show what I'm doing, and I can talk about this piece. We are. I'm looking at things like other open source processes like Tecton. I know that their developers have been kind of vocal in our issues, and then also like Operator Framework from Red Hat. And what I would like to do is put great interfaces around all of those, and make give these things the real GUIs that they deserve. So it's actually really selfish that I'm doing all this. I want it, so it's going to happen.
And you got some distance from maybe some of the day-to-day using Octant, so you have a little bit of maybe more fresh eyes in ways that the external surface area can be reshaped. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm probably one of the heaviest users of Octant out there. And
I mean, as
Octant,
a plugin author, is it from?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at more as a plugin author. I mean, as I see things that I fix, like I just submitted a PR for store create. Oh, need to create stuff, so it has to happen. So there's lots of benefits all the way around for these things, and this ties into now that we have create, and not to change the subject too much, but Wayne did a lot of good work in getting the Monaco editor in there, and now that we have a way to create, now guess what? All of a sudden, this Monaco editor becomes pretty cool, and now you can we got to actually think about how we're going to employ it, but being able to create objects and update objects is a pretty exciting place for us.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and I just want to say that this is I never knew this project would turn out like this, because I had no idea. I actually didn't even think about it. Said it was going to be this thing, and now once Octant runs in cluster and runs standalone, and we have the ability and the ability to add things pretty quickly. Now I get very excited about Octant because, wow, we'll be able to do all sorts of things. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I apologize for that. I thought it was my computer making all this noise, but it's my daughter at home making her actually earning her dinner by using the vacuum cleaner. I'm like, what is my computer doing? No, just my daughter.
You need Noctua fans. It's too loud.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Bryan. That's that is great and awesome. I'm excited as well.
That is really cool.
Oh, I had something else. It's not on the it's something I want to talk about. It's not on the agenda.
Dude.
I told Wayne about it earlier, but I didn't tell him to put it on agenda. So there was an issue asking about could we do web components, and I want to talk about that for a second. So Octant's we have like a couple handfuls, like probably like 4 or 5 handfuls of Octant components right now. And they are layouts, and they're buttons, and there's forms, and there's summaries and other things and text fields. And the problem is that whatever we create will never be enough. Like literally will never be enough. I know this. And people are asking for things like graphing components and who knows what else. Because for a particular display, you might just need something custom that just makes what you need to do look good. And so someone suggested web components. And over the Christmas break, so we're in April now, so 3.5 months ago, I sat down and I looked at how to do web components. And first of all, it will work. The second part, but the hard part with web components is this. A web component encapsulates some HTML on a page, and that's fine, and we could actually make that work. But the problem is that now, how does it look like the rest of the page? Because I don't want to put us in a place. It's kind of like what Grafana did. You're not going to see a whole bunch of funny looking Grafana plugins out there. They all look kind of like Grafana. And I want to make sure that we have kind of the same thing. So what will we need to do? Well, we'll need to make our style sheets, at least our style sheets, available to the web component, and we'll need to do it in a standard way. But then again, we'll still need to give the flexibility of, let's say, a plugin that wants to actually have its own component. We'll need to give it a way to serve. So what we need to do is we need to solve those problems. And I have in front of me right now, I have these notes on it. I'm gonna create an issue around that, and I would love some feedback on what that is, because I think actually having this ability to display literally any content inside of Octant in a safe way would be a big boon, and I think it would go far for plugin authors. And yeah, so that's one thing. So next thing is like plugin authors. Now that I actually spend a lot of time with Octant plugins, I tell the story that I literally created the Octant plugins over a weekend because, how hard could this be? And it wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. So it got us to the point where we could do it. But the problem is, and it ties back into what I was originally talking about, the coupling. We're using the Go plugin stuff from HashiCorp. It's okay. It's gotten us this far, but it seems to be a dead project. And now I'm in a point where, do we fork it or do we do something else? And I don't know what the answer is yet. So one thing we're going to do with plugins, and Wayne's probably talked about this, is that we are taking an active look at plugins. And as part of this reorg, plugins will be less coupled with the application than they are right now. There really are no places that assume that it is a binary, but we make some assumptions about plugins that we probably should not. And then we also don't pass enough information back and forth between the plugin and Octant to kind of makes them a little bit cumbersome to use. And then third, we have like the absolute minimum of a support library for plugins. and which means you can write everything you want if you want to write them at a low level. I still think we should try something a little bit higher level, and that would not be in Octant itself. So if you want to write a Go plugin for Octant, we probably would create another project where it's just a library that allows you to do that. So we can still have our low level API. And then one more last thing on plugins, and I think I might have told Wayne about this one too. So like I said, we were using HashiCorp plugins. That's kind of neat. But I was thinking of other ways, and especially when we're running cluster, we're not going to be able to do HashiCorp plugins when we run in cluster. I just can't see the security model. I don't see a multi-user and all that. I don't see how it's going to work. So I was thinking of other ideas for plugins, and there is literally no document about this. I think I just told Wayne, and I think he said I was crazy, or he gave me I'm a crazy look. But one thing I was thinking about doing in Octant is embedding a Python interpreter. And why Python? Well, because I've written an interpreter and I've written a compiler, and it's hard work. So what I want to do is find one that I can easily embed in a Go app. So we have two options. There's a Go Lua port that's actually pretty good, but who wants to write in Lua? And then there's the Google what's it called these days? Skylark, Starlark, one of those two, which is most of Python, and it can be called from Go. They actually use it in Bazel, so you can write your Bazel stuff in Python. And I was looking at it and thinking, well, that's a great avenue, because we already get some of the way that they wrote it in Bazel gives them the safety that it doesn't tear everything down, but it still gives you a language that's familiar. And so that's something else that's still a little bit out. It's more of an experiment. But once we get our plugin stuff behind a good interface, then it would be neat to see if we could launch another plugin type, and it would be this Python variant, which is interesting, because now we can get to the point where I'm comfortable offering it to multi-user, and and also it should be a lot less of a mental burden to write these in Python rather than Go. I should come to these meetings more often. I have like 1,000 ideas, but I will not share them all.
So kind of speaking along some of those lines, one of the things I was thinking about for Octant is, offering a SaaS capability to host all of the plugins. So if someone wanted to discover all the plugins out there, we're going to try to do a good job of posting them on our website or putting links, or maybe someone needs to search Twitter. But what if we actually had a way to curate the catalog? And by curate, I don't mean to go through validation or certification or anything like that. We can come up with what makes sense for us, but have a way to say, hey, I would like to add a plugin. Let me search what plugins are available, and have a way to the plugins to register a contract so they can become visible there. And it points either to a GitHub page or some other means of consuming or integrating that plugin back into Octant. I think that's going to be a great way for enabling customers to get visibility on what's out there. So for example, you're using Trivi, and like if we asked community, I would say that 99.9% of them don't know that Trivi has a plugin to Octant, but a few folks do. If there was a way for them to find it, then it'd be easy for them to see, okay, how can I augment my view of the cluster with additional details in the areas of security or networking or CI/CD or something else?
Yeah. So that is another reason why I wanted to do Python plugins. I didn't say the biggest reason. The biggest reason is Python is compatible. If I can run it from Go, then I don't care what the target architecture is, because right now, if you create a plugin, and the plugins are binaries for your operating system. So if you really want your plugin to be used in a lot of places, you have to make it sure it's available for Windows, Linux, and Mac. Whenever we do it for, let's say if we have this way to do these Python through Starlark, then it becomes more interesting, because now we can actually bring in plugins as their source, whatever that happens to look like, and we can bring them into Octant while it's running, and we can manage them. So then we would actually need something like some sort of, I think the popular term these days is some kind of hub, where we can actually either register them or get them right from GitHub or whatever makes sense at that time. but I do think that that's a good idea.
And I think the minimum bar is that we don't need a hub. The minimum bar is have a way for plugins to register themselves so they show up in Octant. And it says if you click on the plugins and say, I would like to find all the plugins, just shows a view of all of them with a link to where they are. That's step one. Step two is bring that catalog into a hub, right? So we don't need to do the hub right away, but being able to at least enable them to sign a contract that says, how do I get visibility and show my plugin into Octant? Then that's first bar MVP.
Yeah. Something neat about Octant would be maybe we should version the plugins. That would be interesting as well. So yeah, but Michael, you're definitely thinking along the right lines, and that's how we're going to proceed with this.
So question, do existing Octant plugins, so they run as sub-processes, and do they talk via gRPC to the main Octant process? Is that how it works?
Yeah, we have a bidirectional bridge. Yep.
And so really it's not necessarily embedding a Python interpreter. It's having gRPC bindings wrapped in an API. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a custom Python. It could be just a regular Python, system shipped Python with the right libraries for interacting with Octant. Or are you thinking something different than that?
No, I'm actually thinking of embedding Starlark right into Octant. And the reason why is,
so I guess why?
The reason why is because so on Linux and Mac it's not as big of a deal, but on Windows it becomes a deal. Like, where's your Python plug? Where's your Python interpreter?
Fair enough.
So I don't want to have that problem at all. We should just be able to. It's either that, or actually, to tell you the truth, and this will probably get some boos, I actually wish I could find a good JavaScript one. I find JavaScript easier to write than Python. Shame on me. But that's how I'm thinking about it right now, is that whatever we introduce, let's not make a weird problem weirder. Let's actually attack some of the things that we had where plugins are cumbersome and not the easiest to write. I have one up here right on my screen right now, and not easy to write. The second thing is that plugins are not compatible across operating systems. Yeah, we know. And the third one is it should just be easier. And so that's definitely we'll solicit opinions. Wayne will be soliciting opinions about that whenever we get there. But it'll
probably be Stephanie at that point instead of Wayne, but yeah.
Yeah, and the just to add a note, like you can currently write a plugin in any language that you can set up gRPC for. It's not, we don't currently have all the stubs generated for all the other languages, but I wrote an example in Python that just uses the local Python interpreter. But to Brian's point, it still does use the local interpreter, and so you might be defaulting to Python 2 or to Python 3, and like people, like you remove a whole set of issues if we go with the embedded approach. Plus, it creates a unified language for plugins, which actually will evolve into a richer ecosystem for plugins, because now everyone has to share the same code bases. Like the language they're writing in is the same across all plugins. And the result is that then you get more sharing and more people writing like libraries for building plugins in the language that people are building plugins with, right? So it takes some of that away from all the different like landscape of Go, Python, Ruby, JavaScript.
Are you losing any functionality, for instance, virtual environment support from the general Python ecosystem by using Skylark?
Yeah, so actually I'll say this is not a nirvana. I think it puts us in a better location, because if you think about your imports now, where do you import? You can't just import random things. So we're going to probably have to supply our own standard library if we do this. Mm-hmm. And so you just can't, you'll get a Kubernetes client, maybe you'll get a Kubernetes client, some kind of web client, maybe a gRPC client, and then you just don't do anything else. This is not where you're writing your FizzBuzz apps. This is just for Octant plugins. So we'll
Well,
have to.
Yeah, I'm just still wondering. I'm thinking like Windows subsystem or Linux subsystem for Windows, or what was the old thing called? I can't remember the Sigwin, something like that. Because there's just such a rich ecosystem in Python. I'm thinking like graph manipulation libraries or NumPy or for visualization or any of those things. And I think it would be great to offer that capability without having to do it ourselves. So.
Well, the good thing is that there is an ecosystem around that. I don't know what it looks like. So we'll have to. I
In
just actually
Skylark,
sat
you mean?
Yeah. So I sat down and like, is this possible? Yeah, it's possible.
Cool.
And that's about where I am.
Cool. It's a cool idea. I'm a Python person for what it's worth, so that's exciting for me.
To throw one more thing in the mix, I think it would be really nice to have an ability to. I think the way the plugins work now is heavily backend based, so they mostly go. So you can change data model, you can define your front end through the way that data is passed down to the client. But it would be nice if plugins can actually modify only client side for some reasons. So for example, if you just want to have your specific view of, let's say, pod or add some metrics or whatever, just collecting the data from the server side and then just changing the client, that would be a good thing too. So there's a lot of trade-offs in all approaches, and one of them is just trying to get everything together and show information where it's accessible.
Yeah, Milan, you bring up a good point, and that's actually one of the things that I'm looking at now. Is like, all right, so we do the Python, but let's not make it harder. Let's make it easier to do those easy things. And I can think of things that would be like really easy. I want to add a field to status. All right, that should be pretty easy to do. And we'll probably need to come up with a list of things that we think should be easy to do to guide us. But to tell you the truth, Milan, I thought you were going to say something totally different. I thought you were going to say, well, why don't we do WASM? And I was going to say, I don't know, because I don't know. But
yeah, I don't know either.
What safeguards to have in place so that plugins... Oh, sorry, Tim.
I was going to say, because people really want to write plugins in Rust or whatever it is. WASM, you can target WASM from anything. Anyway, go on.
So I was going to ask, what security measures to put in place so a plugin doesn't mess up Octant?
All right, so there's two levels here. So if there's only single user Octant, the plugins. This is why the plugins get access to basically Kubernetes CRUD, and that's it. They can't really change anything in Octant, and that's by design. When you get into multi-user, now it becomes even more interesting. I don't know if the answer is here yet, and this is another reason why I'm moving towards Python plugins, because then I can make sure that every single time it's accessed in its own container. So not only can you not touch Octant, you also don't get access to anybody else's user information, because it'll only be you in there. But Michael, that's a good point to bring up, and that's why we need to actually think about plugins just more in general as we move to multi-user and what does security look like. Because when it's only single user, it's easy. Well, what can the plugin do? Well, whatever it wants. But when you get into multi-user, it does get harder. So
yeah,
it's in the back of my mind. It's not in the front because we haven't even gotten to step one yet.
Hey, Bryan, quick question on this. This is Andy Schiefelbein. When you go to multi-user, are you intending to get rid of the Go plugins at that point and go only Python, or is it just is it an option to do whatever you want at that point?
So the quick answer is in cluster. If we run this in cluster, we probably won't do the Go plugins in cluster. And the reason why is because let's say if we're running this as part of a workload, so it's in a pod, the semantics for execing another binary become interesting and weird. And I mean, we could do it. Yeah, we literally could do it, but every time we wanted to change a plugin, we'd have to redeploy Octant again. So that's why this is actually what originally led me to this thought of how do we handle this is how do we handle it? And that's what got me to this Python thing. So that,
Yeah,
but
and
I would love to hear your opinions.
And the way that current plugins, like the way the current plugin API works, it's very, like as mentioned, it's very single user. So not only would we have to be redeploying Octant for plugin changes, we'd have to be forking an instance of the plugin per user, because right now there like no user, no context actually gets passed down to the plugin. As Bryan said, plugins can just do what plugins can do, and they assume that they are the sole operator. So again, in a multi-user, that won't work. So being able to control the like being able to actually control the execution within the Octant runtime of various plugins is going to be important when we go to multi-user. So it is likely that things like a random Go plugin or some random Python plugin, you'll just have to use the Starlark or whatever we end up doing for multi-cluster or multi-user, I mean.
But I'll say one thing, Andy. I don't want to break your use case. So whenever we start making noise about this, please chime in and tell us what your use case is, and we'll see if we can fix it, or at least make something available for it.
So, kind of the route I'm going right now is more embedding Octant on our stuff as opposed to us embedding inside of Octant. That seems to be a little bit better path for what we're trying to achieve. So I don't think it would break us at that point if we manage to achieve that.
All right. Well, you know what? If you want to talk offline about what you're doing, I mean, I'd love to give you more insight, and then also give you more insight into how we're thinking about the multi-user and cluster, because that actually could help you out as well.
That would be delightful, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is Harry Bryan. This is Harry as you'll ever see me. I don't have any shaving stuff.
All right. I think that's it.
All right.
That's it. If there's nothing else, thank you everyone for joining today. And yeah, have a great rest of your week and see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, bye.